What's up, guys, and welcome back for part 2 of the OU tier list discussion. I'm sorry that's been a while. That's completely my fault, but we do have Jamvad with me today. Hi.
Hello, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty alright, tired, but as always.
What else is new?
Anyway, so last time we left off with Ferrothorn. If you guys actually missed that, go ahead and check that out. There'll be a link in the description to a playlist. So if you want to go ahead and check out the first part, we did all the way from Amoonguss to Ferrothorn. So this time we're going to be starting off with Garchomp. And this is a Pokemon that Jamvad actually uses a lot. So I would love for him to start off the...
I do not. When's the last time I used a Chomp? Never.
Oh yeah, whenever you don't use Hippo, Chomp is your go-to ground type. So, moving on.
Enough of Joey's lies. But yes, I do use Garchomp. Nah. Probably like a fourth of the time, if it's not Hippo and Lando. I mean, there are only 3 ground types in the tier. They're good. So, Garchomp. Garchomp can do almost anything.
Yeah, many roles.
Oh, Joey, I was getting text messages.
Sorry about that.
No, but for real though, Garchomp can do just about anything. The most common one currently is the defensive set. With the Rocky Helmet and the Rust Skin. Sandveil is an option, but I wouldn't use it. It's not very reliable. Rust Skin plus Rocky Helmet is just a significant check. Oh, just a really good answer to a lot of physical spam in the tier currently. And that Rocky Helmet plus, how much do you lose? 27% on average?
You lose a lot. Rocky Helmet, Ruskin doing 1/8, and then Rocky Helmet doing, what is it, about 12%-ish? Something like that?
I think so.
Rocky Helmet does 1/6,
does.
Yeah. It's 1/6 the max HP, and then 1/8 their max HP, so you lose a lot. You lose over 25% upon touching Garchomp, so.
So I was thinking around, I think it's around 27. So, like, on things like U-turns, which is a very common thing people like to go for, and most U-turners these days don't run leftovers or any form of recovery. Barely touching it, I think Garchomp, you just have to experience it and use it and realize how ridiculously tanky it is. Because it seems, just looking at its stats, it doesn't seem as bulky as it will be. I don't know.
It's that HP stat, 420. Coupled with its good defenses. Like Jam said, it does take on a bunch of physical threats in the tier, such as Megalopony, Landorus, Bisharp, and with Toxic it could even beat Hippowdon. It's one of those mons that you usually throw in to be, like, offense uses it as its bird check, like Talonflame, specifically Talonflame. Yep.
Counters.
And then it's just one of those mons that you can get up rocks. It's one of the mons that you throw in there just to damage off your opponent. If you know your opponent's going for, like he said, a U-turn or anything like that, you'll bring in Garchomp, put something in range. Talonflame kills itself by going for Brave Bird. One Brave Bird on Garchomp brings Talonflame to under 50% from full. So, yeah, Garchomp is just definitely one of those tanky mons. And as Jam said, it's a mon that can do so much, because even though Tank Chomp is the most common Chomp right now, I would argue that that's the most common Chomp right now. It also has access to moves like Swords Dance. Choice Scarf is also seen use, especially with his ground typing, being able to switch into electric types attacks. Specifically like Thundurus, back in the day, was used as a Choice Scarf mon with Stone Edge to be able to check Thundurus, check the dragons as well. Having high base speed over base 100, being faster than Scarf Rachi and things like that. Like, Garchomp just has a lot going for it. Even decent special attack to be able to run mix with Draco Meteor, Fire Blast, and Earthquake, or even, like I said, Swords Dance offensive, Lum, Yachi, Focus Sash, Lead. Those are all things that Garchomp can do. It's just one of those mons that can do so much, but typically the defensive set is seen these days.
Stat distribution is just near perfect to be able to accomplish just about anything. But I'd recommend just using it, using whatever variant, maybe experimenting with losing to several different variants and just sort of understanding. I think experience does way more than sit around theory modding.
Definitely.
I don't think. I don't think. One, we don't have enough time, and I don't think it'd do you much good for us to sit around and discuss every possible scenario. So it's just a really good all-around mod. It can go, as Zoe said, really well offensively, and currently people love it defensively.
Yeah, for good reason too. Like it's just one of those mons you can stick on your team if you need an all-around check to physical attackers. Obviously, what Garchomp has that's not necessarily going for it is lack of recovery. But you could pair Garchomp. I don't want to talk too much into metagame, but you could pair that thing with a Healing Wish user and patch up that weakness a bit. So again, we don't want to dwell too much on each mon. Best part about this is, or the best thing you can do for yourself is definitely trying it out for yourself. But let's go on to the next mon. I would argue one of the most offensive fairy types in the tier, outside of like Azu, Mega Gardevoir.
What do you mean by offensive?
Offensive is in scary when it hits you, and this is a mon that attacks and blows something back when it attacks. Like it's not a weak mon. I guess all fairy types are like that, but
no, I'd say it's way. I think it's, other than maybe like Xerneas or something, I think it's probably the most threatening fairy type.
Yeah, definitely. With Pixelate boosted Hyper Voice, obviously Pixelate not only making Hyper Voice fairy, but also boosting it with an essential life orb boost for no extra cost of your HP. Gardevoir is one of those mons that can switch into the Lottie Twins, especially if you run a bit of extra bulk on it, and it typically runs coverage in Hyper Voice, Focus Blast, or Hidden Power Fire, depending on if you want to deal with Scizor / Ferrothorn / Skarmory, or you want to deal with Heatran. And then it has Stall Breaker options in Taunt and Calm Mind, and it's that secondary typing with Psyshock, Psychic Stab, that actually allows it to break stall mons, and otherwise with its great coverage get through mons that normally fairy types would otherwise struggle with. And again, upon Mega Evolving, Gardevoir gets base 100 speed, so that's another thing that Gardevoir just has going for it, being able to outspeed a bunch of threats in the tier, especially Tank Chomp, for instance, is outsped by Gardevoir and knocked out by Hyper Voice, obviously. And it's a really, really tanky mon on the Spadef side as well. It can take hits, specs Keldeo's Hydro Pump, for an example. And it's definitely one of those mons that's insanely hard to switch into unless you have like a dedicated, and I don't even think there's a counter, because it can also Will-O-Wisp as well, Pokemon that can switch in like Jirachi and Scizor, who would otherwise take the hit. So do you want to go off of it or go on that, Jim?
No. I mean, I agree. Pretty much, Joe explained most of what it will do, as you know, as far as when it comes in. But its role per se in the tier is predominantly just a hit, like a denting mega. It's not really gonna sweep a team. It's just not that kind of mega.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a sweeper, don't think you want to build, because I see this mistake often, where people try to make a Pokemon when it's not. So they'll try to build a team around perhaps, you know, sweeping with a Hippowdon, or you know, that's an extreme example. But certain Pokemon just aren't sweepers. Certain Pokemon stats are distributed differently. They don't get set up moves per se. You know, I think to be a sweeper, you kind of need to either be already fast, in like, you know, in like say Mega Zam or Mega Aerodactyl, where you probably don't need a setup move that boosts your speed, like Dragon Dance or Shift Gear or something. I'm just blanking on the rest of them, but I think it's more wall breaking. So if you need something to just smash fatter teams, say your team is, I guess they'll fill with choice Pokemon or something. I don't want to get too much in metagame. You want to go ahead and throw this in there, because it's so incredibly difficult to counter. In fact, it can't be countered. You know, it can run just about anything to stop anything that usually counters it.
Yeah, definitely, and that secondary typing and its moveset is what really has going for it. You might think Talonflame can resist, but you have to do it Stealth Rock, of course, and then Psyshock is an easy 2-hit KO. So Gardevoir is one of those mons that people typically deal with by getting a bit of chip damage on it and maybe picking it off a priority, or just the fact that taking advantage of its not necessarily slow speed, but definitely not its fast speed. So taking advantage of that. So I think we're good with Gardevoir. Let's switch up to Gengar. Jem, you want to take this first, or you want me to?
I can go ahead. I never used Gengar.
Alright, so Gengar is a really, really, really cool mon that really appreciated the buffs that X and Y and ORAS gave to Ghost, or you could say the nerfs that it did to Steel, because now Ghost is not resisted by Steel type. In previous gens it was, so now you can hit a Steel type with neutral damage. And Gengar spouting that 130 base special attack and 110 speed, that's as fast as Latios, with access to Shadow Ball, Sludge Wave, which is ridiculously strong and better now. Poison type moves are better now in general, just due to fairies being able to take it on, and also having access to moves like Focus Blast. Gengar is one of offense's biggest problems, as well as balance. It has access to Taunt and Pain Split, allowing it to be even a decent stall breaker at that. And it's just its high speed and special attack makes it really hard to switch into. Typically balance would run something like Tornadus to deal with it, but then Gengar has access to Icy Wind as well. Again, and similar to Gardevoir, Gengar is really dealt with by well, the difference is that obviously Pursuit Trapping works 100% on Gengar because it is a Ghost type, so it is weak to Dark, and it has that piss poor defensive stat. And Gengar usually kills itself with Life Orb and takes a hit. It's one of those mons that will come in, get off a big hit, and probably be Pursuit Trapped, or just end up going down to missing Focus Blast versus a Steel type like that.
Wow.
I feel like that's really... I feel like that's not actually like circumstantial. I feel like that's practical enough to talk about. Like that happens enough that it's worth a mention. Like Gengar is one of those mons that hits super hard, and slower teams don't like it. Even faster teams don't like it, especially because it has access to substitutes. So a lot of priority moves that faster teams run, maybe like Sucker Punch, it can dodge. Also access to Will-O-Wisp as well, similar to Gardevoir, in that it can deal with its counters. Just an insanely hard Pokemon to switch into, and obviously with Levitate as well, being able to switch into those ground type attacks and just threaten with its really strong stabs just makes Gengar one of those really big offensive threats in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything, or?
Not much. I mean, Gengar, as Zoe mentioned earlier, simultaneously got hurt and helped this gen, predominantly because so much, like the speed tiers, like 350 is no longer considered that fast. So you have a ton of things right now that Gengar cannot. Gengar loses unless you're super effective. Very rarely is Gengar gonna OHKO Pokemon these days. It's something that it used to be able to do. And it really needs its OHKO, something that Gardevoir can do that Gengar can't. And because it's so frail, most Pokemon can, if it doesn't OHKO you, you'll die. Which is why Gengar has tanked in usage as far as like in the upper echelon, quote unquote, of play. You know, based on tour games, you don't really see Gengar in like a tour game like that, or on the upper ends of the ladder. If you want to count that, I'm not going to get into that, but Gengar just really, it can be really underwhelming if it's not versus like a fatter team with a Hippowdon, the Ferrothorn, you know, the Clefable, the Rotom. Teams like those are just batters. Can't OHKO things as easily, but it's just really difficult to deal with because you almost, when it comes in, you almost have to sack them on because the 2AK is too much. That Shadow Ball is just too strong.
Yeah.
And it's too hard to resist, you know. And then it might throw out a Will-O-Wisp, like Wisp when you're least expecting it. So it's just really annoying to deal with. But again, it's not a sweeper, so I don't think you should build a team around sweeping with Gengar because it's just unlikely and impractical. But if you want a wall breaker, Gengar is your guy. If you don't want to use a Mega Slot.
No, definitely agreed, and I pretty much agree with everything that Jam said. And I don't really have much to add about Gengar. It's just one of those mons that you could toss on a team and it can be a threat. But as Jam said, it rarely like kills. It's dealt with because of its poor defenses, and yeah, I think we're actually gonna switch on to Gliscor now. You can start off Gliscor, bro. I'm actually not too fond of this mon in this generation, but I'm gonna try not to be. I'm not gonna be biased towards it. I'm just gonna obviously give my. I guess giving my opinions is biased, but I'm trying to. I'm trying to just.
Joey is a biased guy. Call him Trump.
I used to love Gliscor back in the day. Don't do that, please.
Alright, so Gliscor, there's only one set, alright? No, I'm not going to turn into Blunder. We're actually going to add Blunder into this. Blunder would probably be like, alright, there's only one Gliscor set. You're on acrobatics, you click X. Like, it's, but yeah. Gliscor, I'm gonna go like on a slight short tangent. With metagame trends, you want to be mindful of what things would probably work best. Gliscor used to have a very popular set in sub-toxic at certain portions in like even in 6th gen, and it could have been effective back then. But currently, I don't think that set will be that effective with what you'd probably find on the ladder. So I think there's only one set, and it's Spadef Gliscor, which seems weird because Gliscor's physical stat is what is like, look at that 125 defense, and his HP isn't that great either. It's not amazing, but for some reason, when you run max special defense, that thing eats every hit possible. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's a niche I think right now. I'm only going to focus on that one set, the special defensive set, whether it be really only 2 sets. Swords Dance, especially defensive, to help you destroy, absolutely murks those bulkier teams.
Yeah.
It would do depending on Heatran, Clefable with the Thunder Wave, murks though. If you hate T-Wave Clef, Gliscor might be your guy. The slow builds, the Ferrothorn type builds. You weaken Ferrothorn a bit, hit that Swords Dance in your Spadef. You can weaken and murk Ferrothorn. What else am I forgetting? Rotom, you can even potentially beat Rotom because
Rotom has to hit all 8.
It
It has to hit all 8 Hydro Pumps in a row in order to beat you, or at least like 5 in a row in order to beat you. And obviously with Poison Heal as well as, which is something we'll talk about, but this recovery that Gliscor has, or Gliscor, everybody, I go back and forth between the names. The recovery that Gliscor has, and coupled with Poison Heal, which gives you, 12% of your HP?
Right, I believe it's that much.
Yeah, 1/8. So, yeah.
Coupled with
Roost, and it's
50%.
Yep.
You're getting 50% and 1/8 of health return. You know what I'm saying? Obviously your HP kind of affects that, but roughly you're getting what?
Over 6. You're getting over 60% back. Yeah, roughly. Yeah. So, Gliscor's just one of those mons, and I'm sure the other set that Jam was going to go on with was the Taunt Spadef set, which isn't necessarily a sweeper, but more of a breaker, a stall breaker as well as a balance breaker. It does the same thing in a sense that it still beats Clefable, still beats those Ferrothorn teams, but instead of running Swords Dance, you run Taunt and Earthquake, Roost, maybe Knockoff, maybe Toxic, depending on the set. Yeah, Knockoff actually helps it. What Gliscor struggled with in previous generations was that it couldn't be a Pokemon like Gengar, for example, but then in this generation with the Knockoff boost and just its nice Spadef and Poison Heal, it's definitely one of those mons that can beat those fatter teams. But I feel like in the metagame, with Keldeo, with Weavile running around, I feel like Gliscor also just wants like 5 slots desperately. Like, it wants Roost, Taunt SD, it wants Toxic at times. I don't know, Gliscor is one of those mons that, it's one of those ground types that you can see and it might be an issue, but you wouldn't necessarily run it. And I don't want to say it's because I feel like there's better ground types in the tier, but I do feel like Hippowdon, Landorus, Garchomp, they don't necessarily do the same thing that Gliscor has, but Gliscor isn't a stealth rocker. It doesn't act as a stealth rock, but those all beat it as a stealth rocker. I would argue that anyway, but yeah, like Gliscor is
never run stealth rock this Gliscor.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think if you're looking for like a quick ground type, I don't think Gliscor is your answer, obviously. But Gliscor doesn't do the same thing as the other grounds do.
Yeah.
It's a very like niche ground, if you will. Like it just doesn't operate like other ground types. Other ground types generally try to depend on eating up physical hits or coming in the most physical attackers, whereas Gliscor is more. It's something that, how do I put it? It's something that's a nuisance. I know with Pokemon we try to think of it like something has a definite end game sort of like end goal. It's either a wall, and the wall stay and counter this, or a check of that.
Yeah.
or it's a sweeper where it, is a very specific end goal in mind. But where things like Gliscor come in is like, if you're not running the SD set, and even then, it might not have an end goal in mind, but it's still really annoying to deal with for the opposing player. So, where you may go with Garchomp, okay, I can switch it into Bisharp, counter that, or I can counter Talonflame. Gliscor might not even counter, say, Gengar all the time, or counter Clefable all the time, or something like that.
Yeah.
But on the right in the right circumstances, it can just destroy a person's team by itself. Whereas the other grounds kind of always have a purpose.
Yeah, it's very team matchup dependent, I feel, too. Versus like more faster offensive teams, I feel like Gliscor doesn't appreciate them at all. But then versus those slower teams where it can literally stall break or balance break, whatever you want to call it, like Gliscor definitely excels in those matchups versus the faster paced teams with Keldeo and things like that that are always threatening it out. Like this thing actually has ridiculous special defense. It takes a Draco Meteor from Latios, so that's just to say this thing is crazy. And it doesn't have great special defense, as Jam said, 75, and then with 75 HP, but it takes the hits that you don't expect this thing to take. So definitely a good mon. And typically Poison Heal is just the most used one. Sand Veil, with Sand being cut down to 5 turns this generation, and Hyper Cutter not really having too much usage, and not really much you could argue over Poison Heal over like a Baton Pass set. But even then, with Baton Pass also being limited, like Poison Heal is just the go-to ability with this thing. And I think we're good with Gliscor.
Yeah.
I definitely think we're good. It also has U-turn and things like that, but typically you don't use it as that, as we did mention. So we're going to move on to Heatran. Heatran is a really, really cool Pokemon. A really solid Pokemon in this metagame as well, being able to obviously resist Dragon-type attacks with its Steel typing as well as Fairy typing. It has great special attack, 130, and awesome Spadef as well as defenses and decent HP. So it's a mon that can take hits, and it has access to the fire version of Scald, which is Lava Plume. So it's one of those mons that's also tough to switch into at times because you can't necessarily. I'm going to give you guys an example just to hopefully give you like a thought process of it. Like, let's say you have a Garchomp. Garchomp resists fire, and I have a Heatran out. If you can't always necessarily risk your Garchomp, because if I go for Lava Plume and I get the burn, Garchomp is essentially gone. So Heatran's one of those also annoying Pokemon to switch into, typically running Taunt, Toxic, Lava Plume, Earth Power, Stealth Rock, Protect. Those are all sets you'll see. You'll even see faster Heatran sets for offensive Scizors to check them, and even the Magma Storm trapping sets with Taunt, Toxic, or even Magma Storm, Power Herb, Solar Beam. Like, those are all sets that Heatran runs, and especially with its Steel typing and Fire typing, being able to resist flying as well is pretty solid in a metagame where Talonflame is running rampant, and obviously Fire and Steel also help it deal with other metagame threats like Superior and things like that. So Heatran is typically a stealth rocker, it's typically a pivot, a way of dealing with fairy types, and it's just that mon that doesn't die like right away. So I think I'm good with talking. You can take the reign.
No, I don't really have much to say about Heatran. I mean, it's just something that gets all. There's certain Pokemon that they have high usage because they're a pretty simple Pokemon, right? So they're very easy to utilize, and they offer a lot while being simple. So Heatran can just provide a bunch of things. It can provide very. Oh man, right now my team is weak to fire, or my team doesn't have a Steel type. My team doesn't have a Stealth Rocker. My team, it doesn't have a Flying resist. Like Heatran, its typing just covers so much, and with that Flash Cannon, that Flash Fire, it just goes such a long way. Oh, I need a Scizor answer, or I need, it's just so. It can do so much.
Yeah, it can even
so
run
little opportunity cost.
Yeah, it can even run Choice Scarf with moves like Ancient Power or Stone Edge to help check Pokemon like Zard Y or Talonflame to help check them better, like things like that. Like Heatran's one of those mons that, as Jem said, really simple. You know what it does, and it's good at what it does, which is why you use it. So, yeah, Jem is just Heatran. I don't know. I said Jem. Heatran.
Oh, man, Heatran, bro.
But yeah, definitely a solid mon. You want a fairy check, an all-around check to a lot of the meta, and it's definitely earned its place just by being literally itself. Like, it's just typing in general is so good defensively and even pretty decent offensively. And that move Lava Plume, which is so spammable as well. So definitely a solid Pokemon, and it does what it does right. Stealth Rock, check dragons, check special hits, and yeah, Tran is just a solid Pokemon indeed. Anything else to add, Jim?
No, I think you got everything. Dude.
Alright, well, you can take your favorite Pokemon to use next. One of your favorite mons to use. You know what I'm talking about? It's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's Sandy. It's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's a Hippopotamus
I
evolution.
have no idea what you're talking about.
Go ahead and take Hippowdon, bro.
Okay, so we got Hippowdon here. Let me tell you a little something about Hippowdon. It's the ultimate Pokemon, alright? It's the ultimate Pokemon. Now, but Hippowdon is a very similar thing to Heatran, but it's better because it gets recovery. Like, Hippowdon, literally, because of the surge of what's common in OU, like, Hippowdon checks almost, probably, it could, let me see.
The only physical attacker it probably couldn't check is probably like Mega Medicham, but yeah.
Like and not even just physical, like it can check almost like half of a tier, like, you know what I mean? It's just so solid. It can come in and it can, like, the recovery is ridiculous. Depending on which way you want to swing it, it could potentially check Diancie, it could potentially check Zardex, potentially check Zardois and Sand. It could potentially check Drill, could potentially check Chomp, could potentially check, I mean, obviously Tran just dies.
Yeah.
Jirachi, if it's not Lord Jirachi. Bloody hits. Like, and it just gets up Stealth Rocks and just walls most of the tier, like, as far as physical attackers. So you want something that has recovery, tanks, you know, the annoying mega low ponies hits, or, you know, something like, I don't know, like Raikou, you don't want to get Volt switched around on Talon Flame answer. Probably was a little better back when people didn't use Wisp Flame on every team when Jam popularized it, but that's for another time.
Okay.
But, you know, Tyranitar, it's just like a solid, simple Pokemon. Like, you put it on a team, gives you rocks, gives you a Mega Minute counter or whatever it is you need. It can provide a Gengar answer too if it's not like Whiscar. You know, assuming Stone Edge, it provides a Thunderous answer if you need that. Because the electric types, if you don't have a solid, because most ground types, what Hippowdon has over them, is that most of them can die to HP Ice in one shot.
Yeah,
most
Hippo
of them
is 3 KO.
right, by
Barely.
like specs. Yeah. So Garchomp, Landorus, the more common grounds. We mentioned Gliscor earlier. All of these are 4 times weak to ice. And every electric type that I can think of, at least, always carries HP Ice.
Yeah.
I can't think of one that just, you know, unless it's a Rotom Wash,
Yeah.
obviously. You wouldn't want to throw your Hippowdon in versus that, but it just has really nice utility versus a majority of physical attackers. It's not saying it counters every physical attacker in the game or anything like that, but it can be really simple. It provides that sand, and it sets up rocks, slacks off, stops all kind of Volt turn momentum, and if you play it right, most times, for me at least, it can counter like 4 out of 6 of the Pokemon, and all you gotta do is just slack off. I've done that in a tour game before. You just chill and play it right and slack off.
Yep.
And you beat the entire player's team.
Yep. Even mons like that you would think would beat it, like maybe Gyarados, for example. Hippowdon can 1v1 them. It has access to Whirlwind as well. It's one of those mons that can check SD Scizor, it can phase it out. Typically you'll see Stealth Rock, Slack Off, Earthquake, and then either Stone Edge or Whirlwind. That's typically the Hippowdon set that you will see. Whether you want it to phase out boosting Calm Minding mons like Clefable while also being able to take Thunder Waves because of its ground typing, or you want it to check Talonflame and other birds. Hippowdon is just one of those fat mons that will not die to one hit unless it's like a super strong special attacker with a specs attack. It literally has to be a Specs attack, like Specs Kyurem-Black's Life Orb Ice Beam, or Specs Keldeo's Hydro Pump, or Specs Steam Eruption. Yep. Because either that Hippowdon is literally eating up every single hit.
It's really hard to open. Yep.
Yep. Obviously, its speed is what it doesn't necessarily have going for it, but that's not always necessarily a bad thing because you get a slow Whirlwind off. I mean, a Whirlwind will always be slow anyway, but you get basically Hippowdon's just one of those mons that doesn't die in one hit, and it's just an all-around good check to physical attackers as well as certain special attackers. And that ground typing, that solo ground typing, has a lot going for it. Just being able to check most electric types in the tier outside of like Rotom. So Hippo's just one of those mons, a staple on balanced teams. Just getting a Bronx reliably, and typically you just see Sandstream on it. I guess you could see Sandforce if you want to use some type of sand abusing, but or maybe you're using like a team that doesn't necessarily want sand up. But even then, I typically find myself using Sandstream on Hippo, just because it can also work as like a Zard Y check as well, just due to the sand. So definitely one of those bulky mons. And are you happy we went over this mon?
Okay, Joey, can we go? Can you go, sir?
Alright, Jirachi's up next. I don't have too much use with this mon.
Hello?
Jirachi's a really cool mon.
I use Jirachi a ton more than I do. I've probably never used it.
That's a lie. But it's a steel type that steel type has a lot going for it. Being able to check obviously fairy types and particularly dragon types as well, like the Lottie twins. It has utility in Stealth Rock and U-Turn, as well as Thunder Wave, Toxic, and its Serene Grace ability allowing Body Slam to have a 60% chance to para, and more importantly, Iron Head having a 60% chance to flinch on Jirachi.
What do you know about that, Joey?
I know about being frozen. Typically on Jirachi, it also has options like Healing Wish and Wish as well. Healing Wish being really, really nice on Jirachi, especially on the Choice Scarf set, allowing you to check a lot of faster mons, like maybe Lopunny with Heart Stamp or Mega DNC with Iron Head, but also giving you that fast Healing Wish to maybe save a team or a team member. But Jirachi is one of those mons that could tank hits and keep going. It has Wish as well, so it can give you that Wish support. And it's one of those... I feel like it's one of those mons that's sometimes tough to switch into because you don't necessarily know the set. I mean, if you find out it's Scarf, then I guess it's easier to deal with. But if you don't see an item, you shouldn't automatically assume Scarf, because there are options like Lure Jirachi, which runs like Icy Wind, maybe Energy Ball, things like that to deal with its checks like Landorus as well as Garchomp. So it's one of those mons that you do have to be careful around. But the most common is probably going to be Choice Scarf. For that fast pivot as well as access to Healing Wish and that fast flinch. You can go on, Jim.
No, I'm good. I don't really have much else to say. There isn't much else to say.
Yeah,
I mean, even entry ground could be on it. Like, you're gonna be careful with this thing because it's pretty easy to check, and that's why it's such a good lure, because it pretty much
it'll always learn the same mons.
Yeah,
definitely.
And its move pool is ridiculous. Can check just about anything with his move pool.
And don't think just because you resist you're gonna live too. That 60% flinch chance is nothing to laugh about. This thing can beat its counters. Landorus, Garchomp all flinch down. Even Heatran can be flinched down if it's been knocked off. So Jirachi is just one of those mons you do have to look out for. It's one of those mons you definitely have to play around before you figure out its set. And once you figure out its set, it's a little bit easier to deal with. But just make sure it's not too late when you do that. But yeah, definitely a solid mon, and its stats all base 100, and its move pool, it just has so much going for it. But where's Blunder when you need him for the next mon? But yeah, next mon. I don't want to take Keldeo, man.
You got this, son. You use Keldeo more than I.
I use Keldeo because I get past Blunder teams. Keldeo, another mon that's just so good at what it does. It has access to probably the most spammable move in the game, Scald. It is like a no drawback move. You literally have to have Water Absorb or Storm Drain to not be punished by this, or maybe Water Veil to not be punished by this move, which is not super common in OU, despite Volcanion obviously being here. That's the only mon that I think that can switch into this mon in OU. Obviously mons like Toxicroak and Gastrodon and Seismitoad have their usage, but They're not OU. And Keldeo is super strong, base 129 special attack, base 108 speed as well, and typically you'll see Specs on this thing, maybe Scarf, but Specs is just the go-to power hitter. That fighting type is so nice on it, being able to check some of the most offensive threats in the tier, such as Bisharp and Weavile, just based on its stab and its resistances alone. And Scald is just so spammable, having that 30% chance to burn. Hydro Pump hits like a nuke on the Spec set. Secret Sword is great for those special walls that can't or won't take it. And then it has, typically on the last move, maybe you'll see something like Icy Wind. There's also Focus Blast, which is an option, which is, you might think is weird because you have Secret Sword spam, but Focus Blast is insanely powerful, being able to Oko Rotom half the time at full and always after rocks. So Icy Wind is an option. Hidden Power Bug might be an option if the team is fearing Celebi. Hidden Power Electric is also an option because it is a Gyarados check just based on its typing alone, unless the Gyarados is running Bounce. But Keldeo, pretty easy to find out what it does. You will see the rare sub Calm Mindset or maybe the Rest Talk Life Orb set, which is more reliable at beating Bisharp, but again, a really, really rare set. But typically, Keldeo is always going to run Water Stab and Fighting Stab, and checks to it would be like Lottie Twins. And the checks to it aren't even necessarily good checks to it because Keldeo is always paired with a Pursuit Trapper, or usually paired with a Pursuit Trapper, since Keldeo always lures in Pokemon like Latios and Latios. So Keldeo is just one of those mons. It's going to spam its moves and it's going to hurt. You typically beat it by wearing it down, by luring it in with Bisharp or Weavile, knocking it off, maybe dealing with it with Stealth Rock, and then picking it off later. But it's just really bulky and it's really hard hitting, and I have nothing else to say.
Okay. I think Keldeo is generally something that it's like an advantage taker. I couldn't think of a right word, but it takes advantage of pretty common things you see. Like, I think that's why Keldeo still has really high usage, as well as being able to offensively check a lot of things and Scald. You know, that's kind of why it has usage as well. Being able to offensively check a lot of things that offense generally would struggle with, you know, the Bisharp / Weavile combination, the Scizor, the Mega Scizors. His typing is just really good in that regard. And, I mean, most of the time you're going to see a Heatran or a Landorus, or, I mean, sometimes Hippowdon. You're going to see a ground, a Tank Chomp, somewhere along the lines, you know, something that Keldeo can click Scald on. And that's really what people do. Like, that's the move you see people click. I don't think I've ever seen a game with a Keldeo where Scald was not clicked, like, at all.
It's just so spammable. It's just so spammable. It's no drawback. So
that's really what I mean, again, as Joey said earlier, lures in the same things as well. Like, I mean, you can't really afford to play around with it once it comes in with that strong water move. You know, if you have an Amoonguss, you're probably gonna go to that. If you have a Tornadus T, you're gonna go to that. If you have a Lottie, you're gonna go to that. If you have a Rotom, not the best answer though, you gotta go to that.
Yeah.
At a Slowbro, you cannot afford to like not go to what your check is, or you're gonna probably lose a Pokemon. But it does usually carry a choice item, and that in itself can be a drawback, but it's equally its biggest asset.
yeah, agreed. Let's actually just move on to the next Pokemon because I feel like Keldeo has been touched upon enough. Klefki. I think the main thing that Klefki has going for it is obviously Prankster, Spikes, Priority Thunder Wave, Priority Toxic, access to Magnet Rise to be able to set up hazards versus ground types, and obviously it's Steel and Fairy typing, which allows it to resist Fairy as well as Dragon, obviously having that immunity, as well as being able to resist Ice, Dark, and also Psychic. So it's like your go-to Lottie check. It can take a mon. It's not one of those mons that you typically see on most teams, actually. I think Klefki is, I don't want to say rare, but I feel like as a spike stacker, it does its job well. But you don't always see Klefki on teams because of Defog being super common, as well as the fact that Pokemon like Rapidspin, Exeter are out there. But Klefki is a mon that can spike stack, and that's typically all it's going to do. Maybe you'll see the occasional Dazzling Gleam or Flash Cannon to be able to deal with like fairy types like Clefable. Maybe a Metal Sound Flash Cannon if it's rare enough. I believe it does have access to Metal Sound if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure I used it. Yes, it does.
Yeah. No,
so,
I invented that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And
you did. Okay.
And also access to moves like Heal Block, which is pretty cool because
I invented that as well. Joey literally takes my sets and then doesn't give me credit.
I didn't realize that knowledge is bound to one person. Oh, I didn't realize it would belong to one person. I thought this was to share. But you don't.
I hope it's tries, but you wouldn't accept it.
Klefki is one of those mons that what it doesn't have going for it is its lack of recovery. It's super low HP stat, and it's not a mon that you will ever see do something offensively. It's a check to mon. It's a spike setter. It's a para or status inflictor, and it's a really one-dimensional mon. I feel. It does have access to moves like Calm Mind and things like that, and but typically you'll see it just be a spike setter or a status setter, maybe dual screens as well, with Light Screen Reflect, maybe holding the Light Clay to boost those turns, but that's usually all you'll see on Klefki.
Okay.
Yeah, and it also has access to, I think, Switcheroo if I'm not mistaken, so maybe Switcheroo with like a Flame Orb. I know I've seen that on like the lower ladder, but yeah, I think that's honestly all there is to talk about Klefki. I really don't think I forgot anything.
I got a few things. As a person who actually uses Klefki,
okay.
Klefki's biggest draw, I guess pull, that's the word I'm looking for. It's just like incredible typing. Like right here, Klefki checks on the majority of common special moves that most Pokemon cannot. In Gardevoir, Cyber Voice / Focus Blast / Shy Shock, though it's going to click Hyper Voice 99% of the time. Tornadus is Hurricane. It obviously doesn't want to get Thunder Wave, so it's going to most likely just hard switch out. You can't risk getting Thunder Wave. Torn Speed is its biggest asset. Gengar, being able to switch into Gengar's Shadow Ball without taking 50% and threatening it out with the potential T-Wave. Again, being able to come in on Lottie's all the time, no matter what, unless they're carrying like a rare Earthquake or something. But even then, the threat of T-Wave always scares out certain Pokemon, right?
Yep.
Being able to come in on things like Pinsir, slowing that down, being able to, it's just that T-Wave is such a big deal, and the fact that it provides a it checks so many things while giving up so little in one Pokemon. Weavile is something that's near impossible to counter, but Klefki is one of the few things that can say it'll beat Weavile one-on-one every time. There's nothing Weavile can learn. Low Kick won't do anything. Poison Jab won't do anything. The best it can do is knock off. Obviously, that's going to hamper it. It's not, like this ultimate Pokemon, but that right there plus the priority spikes just goes such a long way. And most setup sweepers won't even try to go for the setup because of the looming T-Wave in the back. So, it discourages mindless setup. This just sets up spikes versus things like Venusaur. The fairy typing is incredible. Comes in on crunches, threatens out, checks Alakazam. It's just a solid mon in general.
Yeah, it's one of those mons that you're gonna have to get rid of if you're planning on setting up with like a Dragon Dance sweeper or just any boosting speed. Wow. Any
I heard that.
Yeah,
I heard that.
Yeah, I heard that too.
That.
I heard that too.
I was mocking you.
Yeah, you weren't.
I was.
Nah, you weren't.
I heard that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you played it off, but that definitely sounded different than the first one. Nice job. Anyway, it's one of those mons that you want to get rid of. You'll typically lure in by setting up forces to go for T-Wave, so you can take advantage of it because it is one-dimensional type of mon, but it's also just one of those mons. It's good at what it does. So, regardless of if you lure it in, it's going for T-Wave.
I agree.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
Alright, so you got the next one, Joey. I got Klefki. Actually, let me see what the next one is.
Kyurem-Black, bro. You actually used it a little bit.
No.
You used it a little bit. You used it on your Beedrill team.
That was a year ago, Joey.
Still
I
used it?
never used Kyurem-Black.
Alright, so Kyurem-Black is one of those mons that have definitely been hampered by the fairy type. It has base 170 attack with, it's one of those mons that wishes that it had more moves. Ice and Dragon, very good offensive typing with access to Outrage, Draco Meteor, Dragon Claw, and obviously Ice Beam. It also has moves like Fusion Bolt and Earth Power to abuse, as well as access to Roost with very, very, very good defenses and an HP stat. Well, solid defenses and an HP stat to boot. It's one of those mons that's definitely a balance breaker. If you're running a slower team, typically Slowbro, Hippo, those fatter teams, Kyurem-Black is just checking them. It also has access to Iron Head as well, which does help it deal with fairies, but it's one of those mons that really, really, really wishes it had a physical ice type move to abuse that attack stat. Yes, Ice Beam does hit hard, but I don't know, I just feel like Kyurem, it just doesn't have the power, I feel, with mons like Clefable running around. Unless you're running like a Choice Banded Kyurem with Iron Head, Clefable is beating you. It's definitely a threat to slower teams, and its bulk is just really nice for mons, especially its resistances, being able to take on water Pokemon like Rotom Wash, as well as Manaphy, and electric Pokemon like Manectric, again Rotom Wash, Raikou, Thundurus without Focus Blast. Like, it's just good natural typing, but it's low speed, 317 at max, and I feel like its lack of maybe a fighting coverage move outside of Focus Blast, and maybe a physical ice move, I feel like Kyurem's just one of those mons that it's solid and strong, but it's easily dealt with by the same set of mons, which might make it seem like, oh well, we can run this set to deal with them, but I don't know, I don't see Kyurem. Kyurem isn't one of those mons that's sweeping teams, even if you do see, you know, there's mons like, it can run Choice Scarf or things like that, but typically Kyurem is not one of those mons that is sweeping teams. It's breaking fatter teams, similar to Gengar versus slower teams, or Mega Gardevoir versus slower teams. It's breaking them, but it's definitely not a mon that's sweeping by no means, and you can go on, bro.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. Oh, well, not most. Sounds like I'm... But Joey was like, and I don't agree. No, I do agree. Kyurem is a solid offensive sort of answer to a lot of things as well. You know, like, if you're kind of weak to Mega Gyarados, for example, in a weird way of looking at it, Kyurem can help answer that. And it lures out the exact same things every time. So, you know, it can't really afford not to go into your check. If you have a Jirachi, you're probably going to go to versus Kyurem. If you have a Ferrothorn, you're probably going to go against Clefable, you're probably going to go to, because you cannot really afford, not to, because most things this thing hits will get one shot. It's really strong, especially if it's super effective. You know, Hippowdon, Heatran, I'm looking at the ones like right above it right now. Keldeo, you probably don't want to take a Fusion Bolt right there. You know, Landorus, the one below, dies. So you want to be careful, and it's a very solid electric resist as well. If you don't want to sacrifice an entire ground type to use Hippowdon, instead of going for the Garchomp route, you have to go Hippowdon to 100% counter Manectric, Raikou type of electric types, whereas Kyurem can actually come in and offensively handle those without you having to, you know what I'm saying? So while you'll be able to keep your types 4 weak to ice ground type on the team. So I mean, it's just not a sweeper. It's not fast. It does well versus a very particular type of build. And if it's not that build, it might struggle, or it might get one kill, or a kill, or another half, or 50% on 2 Pokemon and then faint.
Yeah, exactly. Just Kyurem, one of those mons that does really well again versus really specific types of builds, the slower, fatter builds generally, but versus faster teams always running Lotties, Keldeos, even Bishop's Priority. Although Kyurem is bulky enough to be able to tank those hits, it definitely has a harder time versus those, especially with its Stealth Rock weakness, just breaking through those teams. It's not by any means a sweeper at all, though I guess if you set it up enough and you're using a Choice Scarf set, you can maybe have a little mini sweep at the end, but typically Kyurem is it isn't doing that, but it's breaking through those fatter teams.
Yeah, unless you use like the Dragon Dance set. Otherwise,
Yeah. Okay.
it's not.
He's joking, guys. He was obviously joking. But for those who are newer and watching, it doesn't get Dragon Dance.
Only.
Why don't you start with the next one, and I'll definitely come in after.
All right. So next we got our. I'm echoing. Your mic. Hello.
You're echoing?
Hello.
You sound good to me.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, I'm hearing myself.
Just turn down your volume, man.
It's not my mic. I'm hearing it through my headphones, so it's coming from your mic.
All right, try now.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, it's gone now.
Okay, cool.
All right. So the next Pokemon is Landorus, and Landorus really performs two things. It's either very similar to Garchomp. It's either a defensive monster, and what it has over the other ground types is the fact that it has U-turn, and it's what people call. I mean, you know, it's not like this term is used too broadly, but it's an offensive pivot or a defensive pivot. Well, most of the time it's just because of its flying type that is so solid and intimidate. If it didn't have both of those, I don't think it'd be that great of a Pokemon. But its immunity to ground is something that is crazy good, as well as it being, you know, obviously the same type as Gliscor. It gets access to Stealth Rock and U-turn without being absolute garbage otherwise, because of its already incredible attack stats. So you don't need to invest. Whereas if you ran the exact same set on Gliscor, where Gliscor has more defense, but if it ran the exact same set as Landorus, it'd be a terrible Pokemon. It doesn't have Intimidate.
Yeah.
It can't afford to give up
Poison, Heal, Toxic Orb. Yeah.
For the ever so common Rocky Helmet that's running around right now, or Leftovers, that's also equally as good. And Landorus is just the Intimidate. This is another Pokemon I think you just have to use to realize the Intimidate makes such a big difference. You know, that's essentially doing nothing but switching in and decreasing a Pokemon's attack stat, which is insane. It's actually insane. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you have, I'm going to only mention Scarf. And you have more of, you know, speed is good enough to operate with Scarf in the speed tier that's common in OU. There isn't much I can think of that, as far as just like normal speed, will be able to handle Landorus unless you're running Deoxys speed, but don't do that. So yeah, Landorus is Intimidate plus Choice Scarf. Even though I wasn't a fan of Choice Scarf in the past, it does have its good usage, or good. It does have, what am I trying to say? It has its place.
Yeah.
Versus certain types of build where it's actually an excellent answer if you don't want to go full on defensive. And what makes it a lot better than, I wouldn't say better, but
unique,
what makes it
good at what it does? I don't know.
Yeah, what makes it like probably superior to Garchomp currently in terms of a Scarfer is because it can U-turn. U-turn is a massive deal. If Garchomp got U-turn, it'd probably be the premier Choice Scarf ground type. But Landorus' U-turn and its ability to intimidate kind of forces you to predict whenever it's around, because you have to utilize that one turn of attack, let's say, with whatever physical attacker you are on the offense with. So say you have an Excadrill, kind of forces the opponent to have to go for Iron Head, because if he doesn't and he Earthquakes on a defensive Landorus with his Excadrill, he's going to get intimidated and he's going to lose all the momentum because he's going to be able to get U-turn upon.
Yep.
And it just puts you in such a poor positioning, especially if the opponent has some massive threats to your team. Landorus U-turning out on you is something you do not want to happen, especially because its switch-ins are generally bulkier, bulkier slow Pokemon. As far as like U-turn switch-ins, it's going to be some along the lines of Rotom, Hippowdon, Skarmory, and if you have something like a Zardois in the back, or Specs Keldeo, these Pokemon are things that don't want to have free switch-ins coming on them as far as threats go. So Yeah, you want to add anything?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything Jam said. Not necessarily even always a fast U-turn with the Choice Scarf, but even the defensive set, bringing in that slow U-turn to what Jam said, Zard Y, Keldeo, basically hard hitters that appreciate the essential free switching and the momentum given for a U-turn. It also has access to Swords Dance as well as Rock Polish, so it can run a dual dance sort of set, sweeping with Earthquake and Stone Edge alone with its base 145 attack. Access to knock off the Intimidate allows it to check bird types like Talonflame, or flying types rather, as well as Pinsir, and just a lot that Landorus could do. Also access to moves like Superpower and Explosion. Superpower also seeing some use on the Choice Scarf set, being able to, more commonly back in the day, but being able to revenge kill Mega Tyranitar, Mega Gyarados, Mega Lopunny, as well as Explosion also giving you, yep, also Explosion giving you just a strong hit. Its ground typing just works out so well with it. You'll commonly see a Landorus switch into a Clefable just because Clefable loves to throw off Thunder Wave. So that ground typing has a lot going for it, and it's one of those mons kind of like Garchomp that you can also just throw out there on a physical attacker if you're running the Rocky Helmet just to get off that chip damage on that mon, put it in range of an attack from another mon, and definitely wear them down. It's one of those mons that will punish you if you don't predict it correctly, as Jam also said, and a very, very, very solid Stealth Rocker, as well as a mon that doesn't necessarily have to go for Stealth Rock when you first get it out. I do agree that Stealth Rock are extremely important, probably one of the best moves in the game, or one of the most important moves in the game. I think one of the most important moves is better than saying one of the best moves. But Landorus is one of those mons that always, oh, well, your opponent might be thinking, oh, well, he's just going to go for Stealth Rock here. Let me bring in my Defogger. Let me bring in this mon that can set up and take advantage of it. And you don't have to necessarily go for Stealth Rock that turn. If you go for U-turn that turn, you gain momentum, and that's exactly what Landorus brings, as well as just a defensive answer to so much, as well as an offensive check to a lot of mons just because of Intimidate. It's really bulky, even if it is running no bulk on the Choice Scarf set, just because of Intimidate. So extremely solid mon, one of the most used mons in the tier, and for good reason. One of the tier has a lot of great ground types, and Landorus is by no means not one of them. It's definitely one of them. So I think at that we're gonna leave part 2 because we're at about an hour, so we're gonna end part 2 right here. I want to thank you guys all for watching, and go ahead and check out my buddy Jamvad. His link will be down below in the description if you'd like informative lives, if you'd like somebody who knows what they're doing, occasional builds, or somebody that will occasionally use 5 Pokemon to know you because he thinks that it's okay to run, to put a Kecleon or a Venomoth on his team. Definitely, definitely go ahead and check out Jamvad.
I'll have you know, sir, Kecleon Oko's 80% Latios.
Oh.
Sucker Punch.
Oh. Wow. You know else? Oko's 80% Latios? Tyranitar, Weavile, Bisharp.
But they're not, you can't hit Ferrothorn all the time, you know what I'm saying?
HP Fire, Low Kick, Fire Blast.
No, get out of here.
In any case, guys, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you guys all enjoyed. Feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time with part 3. Goodbye.
Peace.